Was it really in the national interest to end a Saudi arms deal fraud investigation? Welcome to the week on Newsnight. The Serious Fraud Office discontinues its probe into a multi-billion-pound deal to sell the Saudis' fighter jets, revealing the cost of translating for non-English speaking Britons. With 5 prostitutes killed in Suffolk, we ask if it's time to revise the vice laws. Meet the UN's new all-singing Secretary-General. Are women funny? We challenge the man who says not. This has ended its corruption inquiry into a deal to provide fighter jets to Saudi Arabia worth up to £10 billion. Attorney General Lord Goldsmith said the SFO was discontinuing its investigation into Britain's biggest defence company, BAE Systems, in the wider public interest. Peter Marshall reports.
It's the scale that hits you. The deal between British Aerospace and the Saudis is the biggest Britain's ever had, anywhere. The investigation into alleged corruption has been one of the most ambitious. And the climb down by the government, pulling the rug from the fraud investigators, is tonight being viewed as unprecedented.
It just shows you, really, the massive power British arms companies have within government, and effectively they are above corruption law.
I'm absolutely outraged by this decision. I think it's an incredibly depressing day for the cause of good governance and the rule of law. How on earth can you put pressure, can you lecture other developing countries on the importance of the rule of law when we behave in this way ourselves?
In 1985, Margaret Thatcher went to Saudi to strike the first part of the deal for aircraft and arms, known as Al Yamama, the Dove. Within 3 years, the Saudis were in London completing Phase 2. All that was worth £40 billion. Phase 3, worth further billions, was agreed late last year, but was in jeopardy because of the fraud investigation, a threat that's now been lifted. The announcement that the Serious Fraud Office investigation was being stopped was made by the Attorney General to a near-empty House of Lords chamber. He insisted the decision was nothing to do with commercial considerations.
I have, as is normal practice in any sensitive case, obtained the views of the Prime Minister and the Foreign and Defence Secretaries as to the public interest considerations raised by this investigation. They have expressed the clear view that continuation of the investigation would cause serious damage to UK-Saudi security, intelligence and diplomatic cooperation, which is likely to have seriously negative consequences for the United Kingdom public interest in terms of both national security and our highest priority foreign policy objectives in the Middle East.
So this is about national security, which means, of course, we won't be told the details. But we are being told it's nothing to do with those billions of pounds at stake, nor the contentious matter of arms industry jobs. Just as well, because ministers have recently been warned the Saudis were on the point of ditching the entire deal if the investigation into bribes and slush funds wasn't killed off promptly. All that, the governments say, didn't influence their decision one jot. Others don't believe them.
I think pressure has been applied. There are a lot of people who will have been very, very concerned about this inquiry. My indications are that this inquiry was making substantial progress. There were reports that the Serious Fraud Office had got access to bank accounts in Switzerland. That worried a lot of people. I think it's because the inquiry was making substantial progress that has brought it to an end, and I think it's wholly unacceptable.
The embarrassment for the government is this decision flies in the face of their own recent anti-corruption laws, which state, for the purposes of any common law offence of bribery, it's immaterial if the functions of the person who receives or is offered a reward have no connection with the United Kingdom and are carried out in a country or territory outside the United Kingdom, for example, Saudi Arabia. Allegations of illegal commissions or bribes to Saudi Arabia, diplomats call them quaintly douceurs, have been around ever since the arms trade with Saudi started in the 60s. A former defence secretary confirmed as much on Newsnight.
In those days, you either went along with what the Saudis, how the Saudis behaved or what they wanted, or you let the United States and France have all the business. And I think it would have been quite excessively puritanical for us to say, oh no, we won't have anything to do with bribes or douceurs. We'll let the other countries get the money.
But the governments, as you know, have always denied playing any part in bribing.
Well, I don't know whether we did in those days pay any denials of that sort, but as I say, it was you either you got the business and bribed, or you didn't bribe and didn't get the business.
And there's the rub. If Britain had continued to treat Saudi as dodgy customers, worthy of a vast criminal investigation, then BAE could have lost out to Boeing, their American rivals.
Well, it's depressing because for 40 years the British government have known that British arms companies have bribed the Saudis and they've refused to do anything about it. And so in one sense, I guess, we shouldn't really be that surprised by what's happened today.
The sale of the 72 Eurofighters should now go ahead unfettered, and the Serious Fraud Office detectives will be told if they must chase corruption, look somewhere else, not Saudi Arabia.
This week has been dominated by the grim discovery of 2 more bodies on the outskirts of Ipswich in Suffolk. Police now fear the killings are linked to 3 previous suspected murders and that a serial killer is at large. As the investigation continues, should the laws surrounding prostitution be changed better to protect the women involved in the sex industry? Jeremy was joined by Cambridge Police Chief Constable Tom Lloyd, former Home Office Minister Fiona McTaggart, and Dawn Annandale, a former escort.
If you took the prostitution completely off the streets and had legalised out-of-town brothels in commercial areas or just away from all these residential areas, you would appease the residents, you would take the girls off the streets and away from the danger. You'll never get rid of the danger completely and utterly, but if you take them off the streets and have absolute zero tolerance of punters or clients, whatever you want to call them, and the prostitutes themselves, imposing very strict penalties, you know, big fines, criminal records for the clients as well as the prostitutes.
You considered that and rejected it, didn't you, at the Home Office?
No, actually, part of what Dawn's suggesting, we did make part of the strategy, which is to target the clients, because too much of policing has targeted the women and not the men who are paying for sex. And this is a market. You need to disrupt the market, so you need to reduce demand. But one of the things that we did do, and that's, I think, what you're pointing at, was to say that where 2 women are operating together, selling themselves from a flat, they shouldn't be treated as though they're running a brothel. In my view, quite rightly.
Well, what's happened to that?
Well, the government has the opportunity to legislate for it in its forthcoming Criminal Justice Act. I hope it does.
It doesn't seem very urgent.
Well, I understand that, but, you know, preparing legislation is a slow process. And I hope that, I mean, this ghastly situation is unbearable for everybody. But if it provides a spur to the government to act more fast, then at least one improvement will have resulted from it.
This market has existed since time began, but the new element here is drugs, isn't it?
Yes,
what's the solution to the drug-addicted woman who sells herself in order to feed the habit?
Well, in simple terms, prescribe heroin to reduce crime. But I want to pick up on what's been said, not so much the content, but the spirit of it. Because there's a real problem with the drugs debate. There isn't one. That if people like me say, why don't we prescribe heroin, because it's a rational approach, which I can argue for, people will say, well, you're going soft on drugs. I'm not. I'm actually going hard on drugs, because at the moment, the drug dealers have a free rein. And I've been a police officer for over 30 years. And in that time, all of the efforts of police to try and combat illegal drugs were either ineffective or actually counterproductive, and resulted, as we know, in a huge increase in the availability of drugs to everybody. So what I'm saying, if nothing else, is if the government regulated the supply of drugs, you would eliminate the harms caused to the users.
The whole drugs issue is much broader than prostitution, but presumably you considered it when you were at the Home Office.
Yes, I wasn't responsible for drugs policy, and Tom's suggesting that heroin, which in some ways is a less dangerous drug than some of the other drugs that these women are addicted to. I mean, are you suggesting that we should prescribe crack cocaine? Because that is a drug which is absolutely chaotic, completely dangerous, and...
yeah, and we know that some of these unfortunate prostitutes in this case had a crack cocaine habit of very serious dimensions.
Indeed they did. Now let me just tell you something else.
We'll answer a question. You're suggesting that we prescribe too?
But things that characterise both debates is that the move has to be towards something perfect. And that's inappropriate, because it's not going to happen. What we should be doing is trying to do something better. Now, whether crack cocaine or not, should be prescribed. I'm not sure at the moment whether that's a good idea, but I do know it's a good idea to prescribe heroin. And if that works, and if all those chaotic lifestyles are stabilised, and people can start working with them so that those people are listening to the opportunities they have to change their lives, not doing everything they can to get the next fix, we may well find ourselves in a position where cocaine is actually being given to people under regulated circumstances.
The Prime Minister has declared that those who want to live in this country have a duty to learn our language. Yet a BBC investigation suggests over £100 million is being spent on services which make it unnecessary to learn English. And there's a great deal of confusion amongst those who provide translation services as to their obligations. Here's some of what BBC's Home Affairs editor Mark Easton uncovered.
It's a lot of money in anyone's language. Britain's public services are spending millions each week translating for UK residents who don't speak English. Local councils, we calculate at least 25 million a year. The police, 21 million. The court system, 10 million and more. The NHS, a conservative estimate, £55 million. In the East End of London, Bart's Hospital alone spends £1 million a year. Do they have to do it? Well, the law's far from clear. The Race Relations Act simply says that all parts of the community should have access to services. Public bodies assume that means they must translate, but it's an obligation that's never been tested in court.
There are very small numbers of people, for example, elderly relatives of people who've been settled here a long time, maybe come from Africa or the subcontinent, who don't particularly feel they need to learn English because they stay at home. But for the vast majority of inward migrants, they actually want to learn English. So let's think about the translation, not as an end in itself, but as a way of helping people into transition, into integration in our society.
In the East End of London, I met a Bangladeshi human rights lawyer who heartily disagrees with that.
Well, I think this speaks volumes, doesn't it? What do you see here?
Well, I don't see a single national newspaper in English, but what conclusion do you draw from that?
Well, the inevitable one, that the people in Brick Lane are cut off and that they want to be.
We went to meet an official from Tower Hamlets Council. Zia wanted to take him to task over a Bengali and Somali pullout in their free newspaper.
This is really quite appalling. This is the sort of thing that undermines the incentive for Bangladeshis in this community to learn English.
I think one of the absolutely strong arguments that we have for having this page, which indeed is titled the Harmony page, is enabling different communities to learn about each other.
With a translation bill of at least £200,000, the question was how far would the council go to support non-English speaking residents?
I suspect there'll be quite a lot of people watching this who think the idea that the council should put on, at taxpayers' expense, current affairs lectures in Bengali crosses that line, if you like, of what's really required. But you're saying that you defend that kind of expenditure, that service.
I didn't say I defended the service, and indeed, where's the evidence that we actually provide that?
It's on your screen.
What adjectives? Remember adjectives we use to describe cities?
The Prime Minister now insists that integration is a duty of those who choose to live in Britain.
Diverse. Good.
Learning English would seem to be a prerequisite for playing a full part in national life. But the amount of taxpayers' money spent translating for immigrants is soaring. There are many unanswered questions. No one knows how many millions we spend on translation. We don't know exactly what the legal requirement is. But perhaps most worrying of all, we don't know whether it does more harm than good.
On January the 1st, Ban Ki-moon, the former South Korean foreign minister, will become the 8th UN Secretary General. Sworn in this week, Mr. Ban has a reputation for being somewhat dour. But at a dinner in New York before he took the oath of office, Laura Trevelyan saw a different side to the man.
Ban Ki-moon's going to be the 8th Secretary General of the United Nations. Before too long, he'll be joining his predecessors up here. Mr. Ban seems like a typical career diplomat. Low profile yet effective. But it turns out that he's rather fond of the limelight.
My name is Ban, not James Bond. I'm not codenamed 007. But I will take my office in 07. I may be shaken, but I'm a little stirred.
And that's only the beginning of Mr. Band's talents. Here's what he can do when he really gets going.
To borrow from a carol of the season, Santa Claus is coming to town. I know everybody should know that song. I'm making a list, checking it twice, going to find out who's gonna naughty or nice. Ban Ki-moon is coming to town.
And that brought the house down. A rather more sombre tone today as Mr. Ban was sworn in as the successor to Kofi Annan, who steps down after 10 turbulent years as head of the world's policemen. In his first interview after being sworn in, Mr. Ban sat down with me to discuss his vision for the UN. The Americans would prefer someone who's more of a secretary, less of a troublemaker on the international stage. The Americans are the biggest contributors to the UN. They backed your candidacy. Can you stand up to Washington if necessary?
I think I can be a good chief administrative officer, and I don't think Americans will not be unhappy if I do a good political leader of the United Nations. The active participation and the support and cooperation of the United States in all United Nations activities is essential.
When you take office on January the 1st, which issue will you devote the most attention to?
Most imminently, we have many regional conflicts, including situation in Middle East, Lebanese situation, and crisis in Darfur. If we look at medium and long-term affairs, we must take urgent actions to address these climate change issues. Otherwise, our future generations will suffer from these issues.
As one era ends and another begins, Ban Ki-moon inherits from Kofi Annan an even more turbulent and uncertain world. His task is to find a meaningful role for the United Nations.
Now, are women funny? The writer, Christopher Hitchens, doesn't think so. In a magazine article, he says the essence of male humour is that life is a bad joke, while women risk agony and death to bring children into the world and therefore have less cause to be flippant and/or humorous. There are some exceptions to his rule, women who are, and I quote, hefty or dykey or Jewish or some combo of the three. On Wednesday, comedian Ruby Wax joined Jeremy to challenge his views.
How do you know women aren't faking it when they're laughing at your jokes?
Well,
you know, because I can do an orgasm, but it's really hard.
Now, did you see what she just did?
He loves that.
That's my paragraph too. I said, if she does it right, and she did, you see the full, beautiful horseshoe of the teeth.
The wall-to-wall teeth.
That
means she's ready?
Back,
this is good.
The throat exposed, the momentary loss of... Now, men don't climax like that.
That's true.
So what we're talking about, I should have said this right out of the piece.
It's not even in your article.
The whole piece is too coy. The whole thing is it's a surrogate of male initiative and female response. Men need women to laugh. They'd rather they faked it than they didn't laugh at all. Women can wait for men to keep trying. Well, I rest my, case, I think is the word.
Yeah. Okay, so we're in the right position for you. I got that much. But
one of us had to say that.
All right. But my question is, you're assuming that it's an old Freudian backwater thing of that the drive is for procreation. For me, humor is for relationship, even, for community. Hopefully the community is big enough you can pack the Palladium and charge a lot of money. But it's to, to enhance the herd. So when you're off hunting, we who are gathering have a large group around us.
But you could be laughing at men while they were out of the room.
We
probably
probably
men
are.
Or off on the hunt. And that's what men, of course, dread terribly. They knew.
That we're laughing
They knew,
at
as
you?
I concede.
Right.
Women are witty. Women are funny. And if they didn't have a sense of humour, there'd be no point in killing ourselves trying to make them laugh. It's that men don't terribly want to be laughed at by women. And women sort of know that too.
Yeah.
Another reason why they don't put a huge amount of effort into it. Why do something that might get you a sock in the jaw or a bone through the throat if you were a hunter-gatherer lady?
Can I just quote something? Christopher,
Please.
I had an with a tube down my throat this morning. But I left the hospital because I wanted to meet him. So no greater love.
Hey.
Sorry, we had to meet.
Does he make you laugh?
It does.
He's halfway there if he's made you laugh.
He in person makes me laugh.
Interpolate. It doesn't get any better than this.
But humor, he says, this bit doesn't make me laugh. He says, humor arises from the fact that we are all born into a losing struggle. I'll agree. Those who risk, this is the funny bit, but I don't think he's trying, who risk agony and death to bring children into this fiasco can't afford to be too frivolous. In other words, reproduction imbues women with a seriousness. You've been to labor wards?
Sure.
Okay. To me, they're Vegas. I mean, the minute I was pregnant, never have greater lines left my lips, or with other women. I mean, even when my waters broke in an Indian restaurant, that was when I started. I shouted "Surf's Up," and the man next to me passed out.
You're having a Ruby Murray.
No. But the whole thing is humorous. I mean, women are, the hormones are rushing. You're on drugs, luckily, if they give them to you. How can you say that this is garbage?
Epidurals are hilarious, I agree. I think episiotomies,
Can I get you into bed?
episiotomies, I guess, are not. I mean, I'm only guessing.
No, but why does a funny woman turn you off? I mean, is your girlfriend smart in other areas?
Au contraire, no. Without this, I can't function. You're reading an article by someone who's starved for all of this.
But if you throw your head back, I'd be turned on too. Yeah. Show me those wall-to-wall teeth.
Full horseshoe of the teeth.
I've got
please,
you.
No.
Do you find it's a method of seduction if you can make a man laugh?
Some men, yeah. Some men work, but some men are really terrified of it, and so I've learned to be demure and keep my mouth shut. I can't get them into bed with my humor.
And one of my theories is women have often been
But that's
told
not
by
what
their
you wrote
mothers,
about.
their grandmothers, and so on.
But that's not what you wrote.
Don't show them if you're too bright. Now, wit is an unfailing sign of intelligence. So a witty woman will often repress the fact that she's witty because it shows how smart she is. That's a problem to me.
But if your girlfriend, do you like
I knew my working
intelligence?
title was going to be deadlier than the male.
Which
Whatever
has
the
nothing-
answers were, I knew that.
But you know, Christopher,
and then
it
I had to do
shows.
Kipling, and Kipling says
Kipling
it's because they
has
have babies.
what the great comedian Kipling is suddenly quoted in this. I think, you know, because I
You don't
really
think
love.
Kipling- you don't
I
think
love your
Rudyard's a
writing,
screech?
but I think you were bluffing in this one. I think you're jumping around a little bit, and it doesn't hold water. Here's another quote from you. May I just? Women bless.
Anyone reading my stuff is.
This is your. I'm quoting you. It's fantastic. Men believe life is a joke. Women bless their tender little hearts. What century? Would prefer that life be fair.
He's dreaming,
And
Ruby.
even sweet rather than the sordid mess it actually is. Believe me, women really know what a mess it is.
They talk about astrology
And we
still.
know whose fault it
What
is.
century? The same one. The women still like astrology. They still like to tell you about their dreams.
Which women? I'm
they
sitting
still
here in
remember
front of you.
birthdays. They still remember anniversaries. Come on, it's this century.
Okay, let me
and
just say.
these things, I'm afraid, are laughable.
All right, we're going to leave it
You
there.
prick us, do we not bleed?
Risible.
Okay, we're going to
you bleed us, do we not prick?
Prick me with
Okay, I
my-
think we'll just leave it there before it really degenerates. Let's have a look at some tomorrow
I want
morning's
to have sex with him right now.
Yeah, off you go.
Off I
Please
go.
make yourselves at home.
That was the week on Newsnight. Next week, we'll bring you the best of our short film competition, Oh My Newsnight. If you haven't already done so, you can join in the voting on our website. Goodbye.